Thank you everybody for showing up and attending this session, the conference, the GCC Economies in the wake of COVID-19, charting the road to recovery and resilience. My name is Dr. Ali Al-Bulushi from Sultan Qaboos University. I'll be chairing this session, and I've got the lead discussant, Dr. Fatima Shamsi, with me from ERF. And hopefully in this session, we'll be having, a fruitful discussion around 3 topics. All the topics revolve around the title, obviously, of the session, GCC Education and Civil Service in the wake of COVID-19. We'll be having 1 hour starting from now. We will start first with Prof. Dipanjana Varshni. I hope Prof. Dipanjana is there with us.
Yes, I'm here. Good evening.
Yes.
Good evening.
Good evening. I would like to introduce her first. Prof. Dipanjana Varshni is a full professor and has around 20 years of academic experience in India and overseas universities. She has published her research in ABDC and the Scopus Index International journals. Dr. Varshni has been extensively involved in research publications, focusing on dysfunctional employee behavior, gender issues, employee migration, and employee attitudinal dimensions. In higher ed and learning, her areas of research encompass student perception and attitudes, curriculum design, development, learning methods, and different university systems. She's a reviewer also for some of these index journals. And as we noted, she is a full professor and quite active in the field. Prof. Dipanjana will give you like 10-15 minutes to present your work, please, and then we'll take it from there on. The floor is yours.
I shall. Do I have the rights to share my PPT?
I guess so. Yeah.
Because I think without that I won't be able to share. I'll just try.
I think the IT people would allow you to do that.
You can share now.
I can share now? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll just put it in the... A very good afternoon, and I really feel happy that I got an opportunity to share my research at a very nascent stage, and it is developing, and I hope a few more papers I can churn out from this with different variables. So before I start with the background and other things, I would just like to say that when we talk about this particular area of research, it is very much related to pandemic, the outbreak that we had, and we all know that the pandemic outbreak that we had had really affected our our working, not only in the education sector but also in the corporate sector. So first of all, I would like to say, this outbreak was, rampant, had spread in a rampant manner in the Middle East and North Africa. And one second. Middle East and North Africa, that is the MENA region, from 2020 as per the World Bank. And over a year, there was this massive ravaging impact we had seen. It was observed in UAE and across the globe. Like some GCC companies, UAE and countries, UAE had also, faced the heat of lowering oil prices much before than that. And this pandemic outbreak, increased the situation in a much negative way. Now, there were more than 11 million cases that were identified by July 2020, and reported cases were a little above 50,000. In UAE, we know that there were instructions from the government related to students' movement to the institutions and universities, and all the physical operations were shut down, mostly from March 2020 onwards. So as we can see, this subtle virtual mode of learning, and teaching delivery was not without its bottlenecks, because the country's public service universities also faced a lot of challenges, along with, the universities in the private areas, the private sectors. Even
Prof.
though
Panjana, sorry to interrupt. Are you moving the slides, or because are we still in the first slide?
No, I am just giving a kind of background. I will start after that.
Okay, just because of the time. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, no. I will move it. Now, with this, I had started with the kind of, the research that I wanted to do. I had reviewed around, a total of, I had given the search engines like, students' challenges that are there. I know challenges of online learning during COVID-19 in UAE, and students of higher education and their challenges. And I had come to, a total of, the pertinent papers, the research papers that I found was, 56 research papers, and it included, as you can see, the dissertations. And from those research papers, I found around 35 that was very much relevant to my area of study. And from there, I had reviewed, the various, research done in this last 1 year, 1.5 years. And definitely I've given it, and I've cited everything in my paper, if you can see. This is the mostly, my focus was on the studies in the UAE context, as well as, the other Gulf countries and the Asian context that that is there. And of course, we had some, Western authors also in my research. And this is the list, some of the, the key researchers I have put, and it's been cited in the proposal. From there, the main, the gaps that was identified was, first of all, the student perception of the, the effectiveness of the virtual learning environment. Now, let me tell you, the government has taken a very proactive stand here. The UAE government, they had done some opinion polls once the pandemic had broken. They had taken the, the feedback from the various stakeholders, that is the university management, the faculty members, the students and parents and other key stakeholders. So, and they had also immediately developed, various learning management systems and applications. That is very much there. But there were certain gaps, like, though my research focused on the, the students only, but there are other stakeholders where, a lot of research needs to be done, and also the challenges faced by the authorities, the university management. And though we have a lot of, learning system and framework, but there has to be a model developed, some kind of proposed framework that has to be developed. So from here, the research questions that were presented: are the virtual learning initiatives effective? Actually, from the students' point of view, what is the stakeholders' perception? Here, I have only taken the student as a stakeholder. What should the government's, support or assistance be like, in these virtual learning processes, whether it is direct support or indirect support, whatever it is. And how can we develop from this a viable kind of a framework, though that framework needs to be empirically tested also. So these are the various, dimensions covered in my research: the emeriti students' perception of the government initiatives, the challenges they themselves faced, and also, I had tried to develop a model at the end. So at the phase one, it was a very unique time, as we know, getting sample and getting students to, really, come and talk about all these situations. It was a kind of a uphill task for me. So I had done initially a qualitative survey on, 15 students, and where from there, there were 9 MBA students and 6 BBA students. From there, I had done, content analysis, and I had followed the coding categories. It was all manually done. And from there, the 8 threads or themes were identified through the categories. From there, I had developed 30 questions in my questionnaire. And it was, I wanted to develop this because there was no, standard questionnaire because of this kind of, pandemic perception. and student perception related to this pandemic. So I developed this questionnaire, and initially I had done a kind of a initial pilot survey on 18 students. From there, I found that I finalized the 22 questions at the end. Now this questionnaire was administered to 250. Whatever I had the students and I had my colleagues, and it was a kind of a snowballing exercise that was done. And 130 returned, because I guess the less response was because of the situation. And I found that there was some incomplete data and some kind of wrong filling up of portions. From there, I had finalized 113, the final sample size that I had. And this is the demographic profile that is there. If you can see, there are MBA and BBA students that are together. In the MBA, they are working also, some of them are working. And in the BBA level, they are not working mostly, but yes, there are a few also working. So this is the demographic profile that I had. Out of the 113, I had broken up as per the gender, the education, the age, and the marital status and the work experience. From there, I had taken, various, dimensions that had come. Student engagement was one of the key issues, challenges that I faced, and it had come out from the questionnaires. And the mental health is the second dimension. Assessment is the third dimension. Technical infrastructure is one of the major, complaints and issues that were there. And I had subjected that to, all these items to, the Cronbach alpha test, and these are my findings. So each had student engagement had 8 items, mental health had 6 items, assessment had 5, and technical infrastructure had 3 items, which made the 22 items in total. So this was my finding, and the rest of the questions I deleted from my questionnaire, as I told you before. Now, the proposed model that I gave, after, this particular, it was a factor analysis that was done actually. And this is the proposed model I had, I would like to recommend. First of all, I would like to say the government support is the most, the pivotal area that is there, the crucial area on the universities. And government support has to be there directly for the mental health areas. Now, mental health area, I would like to say, is a severe kind of a crisis, and we found that students have been discussing about this mental health part, and there have been cases of a lot of stress related to loss of jobs or family members being having COVID positive tested. So these are the things that are there. Technical infrastructure, there have been a lot of complaints because of in connectivity issues. So cost factor is there. Students have discussed about it. Now there remains to be seen whether the government will allow some packages or some special schemes for students who are using the internet and other things, technical parts of the infrastructure, or it will be done by the university, and some kind of support needs to be given to the university. And of course, then there is the virtual fatigue, which comes to the the mental health, which is there very much related. The government support has been there. I have seen various research, from the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of, training programs have been given to the faculty members. But, it has to be an ongoing program that is there to the faculty members based on the new features that are coming. And also faculty members should be trained to counsel students if required, if directly counseling is not, possible. So this is, and student engagement also, this kind of training is related to the student engagement that is there. This has been a big question, how to retain the student challenge, because it is not, this kind of interaction is not having any kind of physical interaction or proximity. So, how we can make it more absorbing with new techniques, and what will be the process of learning, and how we can, make it very interesting with various kind of, activities. That is one of the, things that the faculty members need to, practice more and continuously update. And then, there are some of the areas of suggestions that I would like to give in the last area, that is in terms of my model, the assessment part. Now students, now it is happening, fully in online mode. So however, I would like to suggest there can be in future the hybrid model, which is much more effective than complete physical or complete online model. So this is something I found from my research. And then, the assessment methods have to be redefined. Written assessment is very difficult to evaluate, because even after putting responders, we find that students sometimes have, some kind of academic dishonesty means are there. So the assignments have to be more practical. There should be more verbal presentations and application based.
3 minutes to go, Prof. Tipanjana.
Yeah. And from there, I can come to the, the future research directions. Now, first of all, this is, as I told you, a very nascent stage where, I have done factor analysis. Research frameworks can be done, a lot of research models can be developed, with different variables related to, multiple stakeholders, perceptions, engagement, satisfaction, and also other attitudinal variables of the higher education. So it is a kind of, Pandora's box. We can do a lot of moderation and mediated kind of studies. I've already seen a paper on social distancing and its impact on virtual learning a few days back. So, a lot of, scales are being developed also in this area. And as I told you before, also the technical support needs to be given to the students related to the, the internet connectivities, any kind of, if they show their identities or some kind of, government support or university support in a collaborative manner can be done. And then, in future, the last thing we can have is that we can have a lot of cross-cultural research in comparing UAE with the other Gulf countries and how they have faced the pandemic situation, and even the Asian countries, and we can find out and draw out our, research implications and more sophisticated models in future. So this is what I had wanted to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof, for your presentation. Dr. Fatima, do you like to have the discussion now, or shall we have it at the end?
No, I think the discussion will be at the end for the 3 papers.
Right. Good. Good. Okay, then. So can we move now to the next paper or presentation from Dr. Muhammad Zainal. He'll talk to us about adaptation and resilience in the post. Yes.
Dr. Ali, if I may, Dr. Muhammad Zainal had actually sent an apology that he would not be able to join us, and he recommended that Dr. Professor Skortos is going to be presenting the paper on his behalf. But we're trying to actually find him and establish contact with him. So meanwhile, maybe we can start with Dr. Roberts' paper. And if he does join, I will, after that, I'll let you know. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for the note. So with that, I think we would start the next presentation. With Dr. Robert Bichel, hopefully I pronounced the name correctly, and Paul Dyer. The paper is about COVID-19 and civil service reform in the GCC, new urgency and incentives for tackling an old problem. I would like to introduce first Dr. Robert. Dr. Robert is currently a non-resident senior fellow with the Brookings Center in Doha, where his research interests concentrate on governance and public sector reform throughout the Middle East and North Africa region. He's helping to oversee the center's work on the policy and institutional response to COVID-19. Previously, he served as chair of the World Bank Center of Government Practice and lead public sector management specialist within the bank's Middle East and North Africa region. He has written and worked extensively on economic and public sector reform issues in a diverse number of countries in the Middle East, East Asia, South Asia, Central and Eastern Europe. In 2010, he was recruited by the Office of Tony Blair and Government of Kuwait and served as the Director for Policy in the newly created Technical and Advisory Office, TAO, of the Prime Minister. He's got a very extensive experience in the area. But briefly, I mean, he has a master's degree in public administration from Harvard Uni, John F. Kennedy School of Government, and master's and PhD in political science from Harvard's Government Department. He graduated magna cum laude from the University of Washington with a joint degree in economics and English, in economics and English. He has worked on public sector reform in over 50 countries and authored numerous books, reports, articles, and other publications in issues of governance, public financial management, civil service, and administrative reform. And recent publications that he has authored or edited include, I mean, so many of them. I mean, it would take a lot of time to mention, but they're all around the area of public sector reform in the Middle East and the region. So without further ado, if I may ask Dr. Bishel to start the presentation, and hopefully within 15 minutes he'll be over. Dr. Bishel.
Dr. Ali, thank you very much. Appreciate the very kind introduction. This is an important set of issues. The sort of civil service reform agenda within the GCC. And let me just ask, can you see my, can you see the slides?
It's still.
Has the slide presentation come up? Can you see the slides?
No, not yet.
Are you sharing, Dr. Robert?
I am trying to share, so
There's
let
a
me.
green button at the bottom. Yeah, that's it.
It's coming through.
There we go. How's that? You can see it now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. Let me bring it up there. This agenda, the sort of public sector reform agenda throughout the GCC has long been a very important and a very challenging agenda. I mean, it's been there for the past couple of decades. And so in essence, the issues that we'll be talking about are not new, but the argument that we're making is they've taken new urgency in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. And they've taken new urgency along a couple dimensions. In most cases, government expenditures have gone up in the wake of the pandemic. Many countries have been a bit more fiscally constrained than those in the OECD and elsewhere, but their expenditures have gone up. Their revenues have taken a hit with some of the associated drop in hydrocarbon prices. Now that has rebounded a bit. But still, the long-term fiscal picture is not a pretty one. And so these dynamics are sort of coming together to form a challenging environment and exacerbating some of the long-standing issues that many of these countries were dealing with. And in essence, I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, the public sectors are typically overstaffed, overpaid. You have skills mismatches. I'll talk briefly about that. Productivity is not what it could be. And as I mentioned before, the wage bill, which in many of these countries is the single largest item of expenditure, is often on an unsustainable trajectory. But as political theorists and practitioners from Machiavelli to Churchill have said, it would be a shame to let a good crisis go to waste. And our argument is that the challenges created by the pandemic, properly utilized, should create some opportunities to kickstart some of these reforms that have been pending for some time. This slide just briefly underscores some of the points that I made earlier. You can see that it looks at Saudi Arabia, but it could be any one of a number of GCC countries. The size of the wage bill spending as a share of public expenditure is large. We put a number of other comparators there, so you can see Canada, Russia, Ecuador, Chile. A number of these are sort of mineral-based exporters. You can also see in terms of the historic evolution of the wage bill, and again, the Saudi story is not unique. You see this in other countries as well. Not only is it large, but it has increased at a very healthy rate. In fact, several wage bill or several GCC countries have witnessed wage bill growth over the last decade or so that has doubled in real terms. So it has been, this has been a long-standing sort of set of issues. This slide goes to productivity. Productivity in the public sector is difficult and complicated task to measure. I'll talk briefly about this later on. But here what we kind of do is look at a proxy, what are the formal hours worked within the public sector in a number of countries. And as you can see, within GCC countries, with the exception of Abu Dhabi and the UAE, the numbers of hours worked are often significantly less than in other countries. And in Kuwait, in fact, it comes to nearly 12 weeks less than civil servants in Hungary and the US work. So formal hours tend to be more limited, and this varies tremendously across the GCC in terms of both agencies and ministries as well as countries. But oftentimes, even the formal hours are not fully respected. And but anyhow, the point is just simply that these are public sectors that historically have played an important role as channels for redistribution of the national mineral wealth. But productivity throughout the public sector is often lower than what one sees in other countries. Another challenge, and this is a graph that looks at sort of the wage premium between the public sectors and the private sectors. And you can see that once you adjust and you compare people with similar comparable sets of skills, comparable educational and technical backgrounds and things like that, one sees a curious trajectory where staff at the lower level of the civil service are paid a premium. In fact, if you're in the 30% decile, you're paid over 50% more than your private sector, your best opportunity in the private sector. And then that falls off. And so unfortunately, what this means is that staff who are clerks and sort of lower level administrators are being paid significantly more than their next best opportunity in market. And then when you get up to the 90th percentile, where you're trying to compete with staff with skills in areas like IT or financial analysis or policy or those sort of sets of skills that are often very much in demand in many of these governments, there it actually goes negative, and many of these staff have better opportunities in the private sector. So there's a challenge there. And then finally, this is an interesting graph that looks at Saudi Arabia, and it just sort of makes the point, which is well known to everyone here, that WASTA is important. That if you look at how the process of employee evaluation plays out in many public sectors, there is a perception that differs in the MENA region and particularly in Saudi Arabia about how the rigor with which formal evaluation procedures are valued vis-a-vis informal connections and WASTA and things like that. So now that was, as I said, all of that was long-standing. It's been there for a while. Various governments have initiated efforts to try to address it. And some of these efforts are increasingly fulsome and quite sophisticated, but these issues have been there for some time. along comes the pandemic, and this slide just basically makes the point that suddenly the fiscal environment has gotten significantly worse. And as you can see, Oman is the only country right now whose fiscal balance is positive. The other GCC countries, I'm sorry, Qatar. Qatar is the only country whose fiscal balance is positive. Unfortunately, Oman is quite the opposite. And so you can see that the situation has become quite strained. And one of the more interesting statistics that I've seen, if you look at oil prices, they're expected to remain under $60 a barrel, and that will be below the fiscal break-even price for all countries, again, save Qatar. So oil prices, are not expected to rebound robustly in the future, and that further exacerbates the fiscal challenges that many of these countries are facing, particularly when it comes to dealing with the wage bill. Well, okay, so what should they do? I mean, these issues, because they're longstanding, it's going to require sort of a sophisticated and comprehensive policy approach to try to address, excuse me, many of these longstanding challenges. And what my colleagues and I are arguing for is sort of a two-step strategy, one that addresses sort of the near-term challenges immediately within the civil service / public sector reform sphere. And then another challenge or sort of medium-term strategy that addresses the prevailing social contract, which is in some respects at the root of the challenge surrounding civil service and public sector reform. Okay, well, what are some things that GCC countries can do in the near term? One of them is simply to start doing a better job of monitoring productivity and efficiency within the public sector. Now, this is a challenge. Some public sector functions have a clear production function. If you're talking health and education, it's relatively easier to get productivity data to match inputs and outputs and get a better understanding of how efficient these functions are run than in other areas like foreign affairs or national defense or things like that.
Less than 5 minutes, Dr. Robert.
Okay. Where these issues are notoriously difficult. So there are countries in the OECD. Malaysia has also set up and started monitoring productivity. We think this is an important thing for GCC countries to do as well. And you're starting to see some interesting movement here. By the way, Saudi Arabia has created a Center for Spending Efficiency that is doing some very interesting work in this regard. And that's a model I think has implications for others. Improving the management of civil service compensation. As we mentioned, in many countries, civil service compensation can increase at levels that are nearly double digits or at double digits. The way to do this is to set up independent wage commissions and try to link compensation much more closely to the rate of inflation, to gradually introduce more performance-related practices, and I'll talk briefly about that, to rigorously improve performance appraisal processes. Some efforts are underway here. They can be in countries like Saudi Arabia, they can be accelerated. Pushing authority for human resource management down to line departments, giving them greater discretion, but within a framework that enhances results and accountability, and then the selective use of rationalization and right-sizing measures. This just looks at the ways different OECD countries monitor productivity. As I said, I think that this is an area that GCC governments would be well served in replicating that and setting up units and institutions dedicated to that in their own countries. I mentioned before, I think it's very important when you think about civil service reform in the GCC that you target both high performers and low performers. You'll have a large mass of performers in the middle, but what you want to do is implement programs that will strengthen motivation and reward talent by fast tracking young workers, creating senior executive corps, things like that. And then on the other end of the public sector, it's very important to enforce existing rules, and including providing sanctions for absenteeism and non-performance, which are often neither tracked nor applied with great rigor. For the medium-term measures, here, I think one wants to go along two lines. It's very important to de-link sort of public employment from the share of the national mineral wealth. And as we said, that will require an integrated approach addressing public sector reform, but also private sector development and economic diversification, which is a huge and long-standing agendas in the region, as well as a very sophisticated and targeted communication strategy. What you're seeing in some places, and COVID-19 has imparted some momentum to it in terms of stipends and monetary support. More broadly, there are efforts to look at a basic living wage and what that would work. I think the broader delinking activity would involve reforms in social safety net programs to sort of give people a broader and more dedicated stake, something like the Alaska Permanent Fund dividend or something like that, so that they have a share of the national oil wealth that is not related to a job, and at the same time sort of look more carefully at targeted recruitment in areas where skills are really missing, and reducing the sort of broad general intake that many countries do. So just to sum up, it's a large agenda, it's an important agenda. The need to strengthen meritocracy will be key to ensuring the trajectory of all of these countries. And the COVID-19 pandemic is providing incentives to take this agenda forward more robustly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think you presented the topic very well, very on time, and yeah, thank you for that. I'm not sure if the last presenter is available before we hold the discussion. Is he?
Professor Scortis. Professor Scortis.
Yes, yes. Hello, hello. Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Thank you very much.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for tolerating with me and all my technical problems.
That's okay. That's okay. Thank you very much, Professor Mikhail Scortis.
Yes.
You'll be presenting the paper titled Adaptation and Resilience in the Post-COVID-19 Academic Landscape, the case of CBA, Kuwait University, on behalf of your team, obviously. Would you like to start? And you are given 15 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I will share my screen. Το πάτησε αυτό.
Διαλέγεις ένα από όλα. Διαλέγεις.
Ποιο, μα δεν έχει το δικό μου. Basic. Sorry, I tried to find how I share my screen with you.
There's a green button at the bottom.
The green at the bottom. Yes, I did. And then I have the options desk one, desk, I guess, yeah?
It's
and I open my P.
The presentation material opened against.
And then I will open my presentation, yes. Okay. Thank you very much. I hope you see it now.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Okay. Hello and good evening. My name is Mikhail Scortis. I am at CBA at the Economics Department. I was one of the authors of the paper that I'm presenting. Unfortunately, Dr. Zainal, acting dean, could not make it today. So I will try to make my best to give you the essence and the main spirit of the paper. we're talking about COVID. We're talking about a very rare event, a very hard disruption and discontinuity in all matters of affairs, social and economic. And some of us, I mean, the whole world, but some of us have a peculiar feeling of it because we've been struggling in different ways to overcome it. I was happy to hear the presentation of Professor Dipanjana, which she very lucidly enumerated a number of problems that are facing the higher education today. And I have to say, I'm feeling that I'm giving you an overview of first results, or if you like, first attempts to hands-on solution to these problems. So my presentation is not very sophisticated. It is a plain description and plain, if you like, for problem setting of how we at Kuwait University and peculiarly at the College of Business Administration, we try to address the challenges. Okay. First of all, let me introduce ourselves. We are the only state university in Kuwait, existing like 61. We are proud to have one of the largest educational campuses in the world, which of course means nothing in terms of our quality, but I'm to tell you something about our quality. I have to tell you that the College of Business Administration is one of the 500 college business schools around the world accredited by AACSB. We belong to this elite 500 business school family since now 20 years. So we are striving to keep our quality high, to produce innovative and responsible professionals, but while we do this, to engage with the society, and well, and then COVID happened, and we see what that means. CBA, the College of Business Administration, to give you some numbers, for example, we have 5 departments, 7 bachelor programs, 3 graduate programs. We have something like 2,700 undergraduate students, 7,250 postgraduates, and a student to faculty ratio 1 to 22. A very, very, very low ratio, and something that many colleagues from, especially from foreign universities and from USA, especially envy us for this. A very, we are very good relation for teaching our students. From our own assessment, I'm not talking about AACSB, from our own assessment, and maybe that is a bit biased, but we seem to have a good record in some main indicators like presence and excellence, sustainability, innovation, quality, but still these are not what keep us going. What keep us going is more or less the attempt to improve ourselves continuously. When in 2008 we had the financial crash, and we all remind ourselves that we are living in an unstable and globalized world economy, then we thought the damages were very high, and now compared to COVID-19 and the pandemic, we think that we realize how higher the financial and economic cost is, how longer the recession will last, and how societal tensions are getting more and more tense. So it is imperative that we understand what is happening. It's imperative to understand what that means in different areas of our activities and in the universities, to try to revisit and rethink again what is actually our task, how we're doing it, and to bring more and more innovative ideas into the daily functioning of the university. So do not forget that by definition, education is a very strong component of positive component of economic growth. It's supposed to enhance, and it does enhance productivity, it improves livelihood standards, promotes equality of opportunities, nurture responsible and democratic citizens. So this is the importance, this signifying the importance of education makes the damage that we had from COVID more important and more eager to look upon it. Because there is no exception when we talk about damage. According to the World Bank, at the beginning of September, beginning of this fall, around the world, there was something like 220 million of students, 16.8% of the post-secondary school students were out of school, and there was something like some thousands of schools that had difficulties in the functioning. So it's really a matter of that deserving the most of our importance. Now, the problems is not technological. Remote sensing means understanding and conquering remote platforms and all these specific softwares and all these skills, technical skills. This is one thing. But what we faced it. We had a lot of work to do with this. But what after a while we very soon understood is that there are other, behind this technical problem, there are psychological and organizational and other human problems that weigh far too much more than the technical problems. So we start to think about new strategies and policies to how to facilitate the transition to remote teaching, because we knew that this transition was not, remote teaching came to stay, is here to stay. There is no way, I don't think that in the post-COVID educational landscape that we come back to something similar to what used to be. So the post-COVID normal, educational normal, will be something different. And we have to visualize it, to see it in front of our eyes and think about new strategies. What is important is that the faculty-student interactions are not anymore the same. It's totally different standing with the students in a physical matter in a room and giving a lecture, and totally different doing this, especially for a long period of time, through the internet. And of course, besides this student-faculty interaction, we have what follows is that the teaching and assessment modes, is a very, very important thing and has occupied a lot of our strategies. You have to be very innovative to think of new ways how to build up new teaching and assessment modes and also administrative functioning. And of course, the required skills and technological literacy is always there, and we have to build always our students and ourselves more and more on this. So I'll give you an overview of COVID-19 pandemic in Kuwait. I will tell you a bit about Kuwait University responses, about our CBA's response in detail, and our evolving state of mind on the new challenges and the way forward as we perceive it. I will be very quick here. You see here is more or less the details of the beginning of and the start and proliferation of the pandemic in Kuwait. It all started February 24, 2020, and until now, things are moving the way you all know through the daily news, and well, a bit things have changed with the vaccines that came on the screen, but for the universities, we are more or less in a state very, very liquid, very, very changing, very, very fragile.
5 minutes, Prof.
Okay. The whole economy, of course, in a fragile situation. We know what that means for the whole economy. I'm not saying you have discussed it much more in detail. The Kuwait University was very quick in the response. Immediately there was an overall directive that each college had to more or less adopt its own strategy. And in the CBA, we started with a lot of big number of webinars and educational tools to help build, first of all, the information and the software literacy. And then we went on with students. We tried to make students more positive against remote teaching. They were not. And cultural characteristics like use of camera. Our students, most of them do not like to use open their cameras in the class, and that creates a big problem, especially in times of evaluations of exams. But these are things that we discuss with them, and we try to solve as we process in time. So this is another short description of the steps taken from June 2020 to August 2020. And of course, the research output and our engagement was impacted. Of course, academic research, especially in our area, does not need to be on campus. We can do it also from our office at home. But our different kinds of networks, research networks, were very much disrupted, and we had a setback. But we used a lot of help from Kuwait Foundation for Advancement of Science that in order to fund and stimulate groups that they will devote their research on the pandemic-related fields. The challenges continue until now. Educational quality, we are trying. I'm speaking also from the point of view of accreditation director, and I'm looking at the whole changes, how they fit into the, for example, assurance of learning. We know that we have established certain tools to measure the success of our teaching, the assurance of learning, but now all this change and what is coming new, it's still something that we debate. We would like to get our next 5 years of accreditation process, and that was in the middle of pandemic. We did it with a virtual visit. One of the few universities at the beginning who succeeded on this, and that took really a huge effort, but the result was positive, and we are accredited for 2020 to 2025. So I think I will be very quickly, and okay, going forward, the pandemic, as I said, is here to stay. Of course, the future is online, that cannot be denied, but we have to work more on the students, professors' interactions and psychological problems. And from all these, we see what emerged from the day after COVID. Thank you very much. I was quick. I hope that I can answer some of these points in questions if you have some. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your concise presentation and abiding by the time. Thank you, Prof. Mikhail. Really appreciate it. Now we'd like to open the floor for discussion and questions. We have a number of questions already, raised in the Q&A. Dr. Fatima, would you like to take the lead here?
Let me. Thank you, Dr. Ali, for this conference, and really, it is very rich papers that presented. I will start by identifying some points that I have seen in the paper. And I will start with Professor Banyana's paper. I think her paper's objective is to explore the Emirati student perception of online learning. And she's really did a great job in applying to tackle this issue from the quantitative and qualitative things. However, it is well known that online learning is a whole new dimension for many institutions and students, and that if they wanted to keep up to par with the changes and to keep the standard of the standard and quality of education, modernization of the whole system has to be taken into consideration. And it has been taken at very fast to redefine the set of new policy and procedure that should be taken. It's also online bring burden not only to the government and education institution, but also to the parents. So this is parents and the family. Also, they should be taken here into consideration. The paper of Professor Minjana is highly policy relevant. However, it needs, I mean, since we don't have the whole paper, it was only the abstract that we received. It needs clear identification of solid policy recommendation. The model that's presented, it looks very complicated, so it needs to be simplified and identify clearly on what is the policy recommendation that it comes. In terms of challenges, there are many studies that look at these challenges, and they're identifying them. There should be the priority that should be given to ensure that academic learning for all students, and they should be supporting to the independent study, and they should be ensure well-being of all parents and the students, as well as teacher, and they should be also on the other hand, they should be look at the graduation policy, all the other policy, exams policy, ensuring integrating assessment process, and these challenges that need to be tackled and we need to look at. Of course, it is important that all institutions need to implement a modern education system that is all inclusive, being able to support students, staff, parents, and educational institutions also need to provide continuous training and education to staff, to faculty, to the student on the distance learning and this thing. There is one point that needs clarification in the abstract that was sent by Professor Minjana. In page 1 of her abstract, she mentioned that the sudden virtual mode of learning and teaching delivery was not without its bottlenecks because the country, because the country's public university faced more challenges than private university or college. My question, in what sense and how did she reach this conclusion relating to that the public university is facing more challenge than private university? However, I mean, I congratulated Dr. Benjamin on his paper, and I think it's need, little work to be good for publication. If I move to Dr. Robert, because he was the second, I think Dr. Robert provides a very rich also paper, although it is not completed. It's only an abstract that we receive, but its objective is the main objective that is provided is to help GCC government with short and accessible roadmap for public sector reform that can be implemented in the near term and will allow them to obtain greater value from the considerable investment that they are making in their public labor force, while at the same time replacing it on a more sustainable trajectory. The author methodology appear to rely on the best practice approach, and he provides valuable near-term and medium-term measure. The topic is of strong policy relevance. However, the finding need to be practical. It is well known that the regulatory environment and the capacity of the state to react and respond to different needs of its population are key factors. And the resilience of the economic reform agenda depends on social acceptance of negotiation with the citizen. To reform the economy of the GCC, there will have to be a careful rebalancing of the workforce and the creation of new workforce in the private companies and entities that do not depend on the state. As we know that most of the private sector entities are depending on the state. So this reform will displace some migrant and discomfort some citizen as well. What is needed at the first stage is the government to identify their role, their core role in the economy, and what is the service that should be provided or left with them, and what is its cost. It's also, we need time for labor force to be encouraged to take new jobs or to go to the private sector and service, for example, or retail or construction job. There are some efforts that has been taken, and they prove that they are not, there is no success of this effort. For example, after the reform began in Saudi Arabia in 2015, number of Saudi employed in private sector actually fell by like 43,000, which suggesting that initiatives had failed to create incentive for Saudi to seek private sector employment. Another example, also, Saudi Arabia created like 417,000 new jobs in 2015. 88% of this job went to the national. So such deep challenges to successful reform exist. On the other hand, managing expectation is critical in policy initiative to restructure Gulf economies and resolve the imbalance that have held back economies diversification and the creation of genuinely autonomous private sector that can one day replace the public sector as an engine of long-term growth and a job provider. The third, I think Dr. Robert, since it is only it is not completed paper. That there are a lot of things that will be presented or will be added to this paper. The third paper of that presented by Mikhail, its objective also to discuss the impact of COVID pandemic on the academic operation in the College of Business Administration. The authors provide comprehensive and detailed report on the process followed to implement distance learning at the university and college level. They identify the phases and the process of implementation and the method followed in the method they are followed. But the method that you're using, it is descriptive reporting of the process. So I would suggest to enhance this research, there should be application of qualitative and quantitative measure, like for example, survey, interviews, literature review, just to measure the challenges and to the outcome of implementing this paper, this process. The paper also doesn't highlight the uniqueness and peculiarity of such experience. And this could be done through comparative analysis across several universities. I think many other universities in Kuwait or even in the region went through the same process. So what's the unique about the experience of Kuwait University? Also, the author certain in some part that overall the transition to online learning has been met with success and is in the line of Kuwait mission, Kuwait University mission of graduating innovative business professional. My question here, what is the measurement that used to measure this success, and what is the supporting outcome? Also, in page 14, it is indicated that the crisis presented a unique opportunity to improve teaching effectiveness by offering real-world example of its effort on the economy to be incorporated in course material in real time, thus making education more relevant than abstract. This should not be specific to remote teaching only. It should be for all teaching, even in traditional teaching way. While the paper provide a detailed explanation on the process of tackling the need to convert to distance learning in College of Business, it missed the qualitative analysis of the impact of change on both the student, faculty, and parents. There are a lot of details also, and there is a lot of repetition in the paper that needs to be shortened and summarized. Thank you very much. Otherwise, it is really an excellent presentation and excellent paper that provided to this conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fatima, for your insightful, feedback and suggestions. I would love really to continue the discussion between the presenters and the audience, but unfortunately, due to the time constraint, I would have to conclude the session now. Hopefully, in the future, you can make any kind of certain networking between the presenters and the audience. So please accept my apology for this. It's just because of the time, and we dragged it, too much behind schedule. So without further ado, I would like to conclude the session, and hopefully all our audience found it quite useful. Thank you very much.